Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm your host, John, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about my experiences first running a Knave 2nd edition one-shot. But before we do that, we've got a voicemail to respond to. We're going to get to that straight after the theme music.
Hey John, Ricard here. I have no podcast, unlike many of your other speakers.
Don't worry about not having a podcast, dude. Anyone who's interested in tabletop RPGs is more than welcome to call in, and we love getting these call-ins. Anyway, I'm sorry for butting in. Please go ahead.
But I've been following the Red Dice Diaries for a long time, and really good to hear Hannah again. It's been a while since I've heard her, and I really liked the episode on the wizards change that you want to do. And in my opinion, as a DM, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Like, it's one more thing you can offload, and it's just like a little checkbox that you tick and you're good to go. But I think I would talk to my players, definitely. I would talk to them and tell them I want to use this system because it would make things a lot easier for me. And I would have to respect their choice, because as a player, I think maybe like wizards are probably the coolest, unpredictable thing that you are going to fight. Well, not the coolest, but you know what I mean. You know, like, you never really know what they're capable of until they do stuff. And like this, you know, oh, this guy is gonna have like 1 or 2 magic missiles. This guy's gonna have 1 or 2 manipulation spells of some kind. So it makes the game more gamey, which isn't always good. But really enjoyed the episodes and really excited for your Warhammer stuff. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that call, Ricard. Much appreciated. And yeah, I think you're right. If I'm going to make that sort of change with the wizard, then it definitely, as you and Hannah has said to me, it's definitely something I'd have to talk to my players about rather than just making the changes. I'm glad you enjoyed hearing Hannah back on the mic. I always enjoy recording the episodes with her. It's just whether our schedules sync up and whether it's a subject she feels comfortable in talking about. For instance, the rest of this episode is going to be me talking about my experiences first running a Knave 2nd edition one-shot. Hannah wasn't involved in that. She doesn't really know a great deal about Knave, so she probably wouldn't feel comfortable talking about that. But we'll definitely be doing more episodes together in the future. As for the Warhammer stuff, yeah, we've just started doing the second book of the Enemy Within campaign, Death on the Reich. We did the first session, and I was a little bit, not annoyed, but a little bit miffed that you know, you're supposed to be doing like a river crawl, and there's a lot of like river trading and stuff that can be done. But the actual map that's included in the book doesn't have a scale on it. It's not terribly useful for determining that sort of thing. So I felt like in the first session, I was sort of set a little bit adrift without means of support. And don't get me wrong, we had a good session and we enjoyed it, but I've now had to put in like almost like 2 days worth of like work to create my own map, to detail out the various settlements and whatever, just so we can actually like do a core bit of the game, which, given how much emphasis they place on it, I feel like they kind of should have covered in the books. And I can see why in the few times where I've played Enemy Within, pretty much every GM who's run it in a game that I've played in has stopped running it after the first book. So basically when they get to Death on the Reich, and I can sort of understand that, it suddenly goes from like, oh, it's a fairly sort of linear adventure with a bit of exploration you're doing, to like, here's this whole sort of river trading thing with a system for it, but you're going to have to do most of the legwork. GMs were really not going to support you there. And I thought, you know, given the amount like the books cost, not great. Don't get me wrong, I'm still enjoying the campaign and I'm glad I've put the work in now. I'm very much looking forward to it. I might make the map and some of the work I put into it available at a later date, but we'll just see how that goes. Anyway, again, thank you very much for your call. And now we're going to crack on with the rest of the episode, which, as I said earlier, is talking about Knave 2nd edition. Okay, so last week I ran my first Knave 2nd edition game. It was a one-shot, based loosely around the Isle of Dread, and I mean very loosely. If you're not familiar, Knave 2nd Edition is a streamlined D&D-esque game written by Ben Milton of Questing Beast fame. I'm sure you probably don't need it. If you're into D&D, you've probably heard about him, but I'll put a link to his YouTube channel down below. It was previously available in its first edition as a PDF for a few dollars, and that's still available on itch.io. I'll put a link down below, and I think on Drive-Thru, which is where I got it from. I had the first edition. I printed it out as a little booklet. It was a cool, stripped-back version of D&D that had some interesting ideas and a load of very characterful random tables in it. And it sort of built on Ben's previous and also excellent game, Maze Rats, which, as part of the Kickstarter for Knave 2nd Edition, you get a nice printed version of Maze Rats, so I definitely went in for that. Now, some of my favourite tweaks to the rules were you had no classes, your expertise was determined by your career, which was normally randomly rolled, and the gear you had. Effectively, anyone could be a spellcaster, you just needed a spellbook and a sort of semi-decent intelligence score. It's got the familiar D&D attributes, whereas the predecessor Maze Rats stripped it down to, I think, about 3 attributes, and stuff was easy to convert. And if I remember correctly, Ben originated this streamlined system as a way to run old school modules at cons, and I can certainly see that being the case and how it would be great for that. Item slots were used both for encumbrance and also they were figured into how damage worked. So when 2nd edition was kickstarted, I had no hesitation in backing it, and I got both a copy of the cool cloth-bound version, which is sort of like imprinted on this black cloth-bound version, like a sort of abstracty dungeon background, and also the standard version with a lovely piece of cover art by Peter Mullen, whose work I've been a big fan of since seeing it used a fair bit on old school essentials. Okay, so what are the main rules for Knave 2nd edition? Well, most rolls are attribute checks. You roll a d20 and add the attribute modifier. Since Knave doesn't bother about having a separate score and a modifier, it just tracks the modifiers. Advantages and disadvantages and careers and backgrounds modify either by like +5 or -5 respectively, depending on if it's an advantage or a disadvantage. The DC for rolls is 11 plus the task difficulty number, which is normally 5. Player characters have 10 plus their constitution item slots to carry stuff. Most items take up a slot, 2-handed items take up 2, surprisingly enough. 500 coins is a full slot, and some small items can be grouped together based on a bit of sort of GM fiat. Damage is initially deducted from hit points, a la standard D&D. However, when a character reaches 0 hit points, or if a creature is labelled as doing direct damage, then each additional point of damage injures an item slot, making it unavailable for holding items. So, as you get more injured, you have to start making tough decisions about dropping equipment, loot, etc. I love this, and it really played a part in the one-shot we were running. There were several times where one of the player characters took a little bit of a beating from some jungle predator and was suddenly like, oh, what can I afford to leave behind just so I can get out of here? Or if we go into another combat, are we going to be able to carry any loot out and stuff like that? Which I think is a really cool additional element, and it adds to that whole resource management element, which I think is pretty essential for D&D. It's only when you have 0 hit points and no remaining unwounded item slots that your PC is dead. Each spell is contained in a single spellbook, which takes a slot to carry and can be used once a day. A PC can use a number of spellbooks per day equal to their intelligence score. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. Although the book is approximately 75 pages, the rules themselves are probably less than a dozen of these pages. In fact, since the front inside cover contains a condensed version of the rules, and the back covers contain the various crawling procedures, I'm pretty sure you could run it using just that beautifully simple reference material. However, that's not to say that the rest of the book goes to waste. It's chock full of random tables to help you generate everything from NPCs to spells to towns to dungeons, etc. And the tables are all really cool and useful, to the point where, even if you're not going to run Knave, given the very reasonable price of the book, I think it's like $20 US from Itch for the 2nd edition PDF, or $35 for the standard hard copy, and again I'll put links down below, I'd suggest picking it up as a resource for any fantasy game where tables and procedures are useful. And to be fair, if that's a little bit on the pricey side for you or beyond your budget, as I said, the 1st edition is still available, and that's a lot cheaper. So, let's talk a little bit about the one-shot I ran. I'm sure you can tell I was pretty hyped to try this out, and I got my chance when the stars finally aligned and myself plus a couple of friends were able to do a one-shot. I ran them through an extremely abbreviated version of the Isle of Dread, effectively brutally chopping bits out so we could fit it into a 3 or 4 hour session. Essentially, the game plot went a bit like this. The PCs were traders who dealt with locals to the island. They were asked by the chief to look into disappearances of tribespeople. They fought some dinosaurs and ape men, discovering signs of a long-lost race of beings who originally enslaved the islanders and worshipped the dark god. They eventually found their way to a taboo island that the locals would not even speak of. On that island, a remnant of the ancient people was sacrificing kidnapped tribespeople to raise his god, a huge earth elemental that he could control and throw against his enemies. The player characters, after many hijinks and misadventures, were able to prevent his sacrifice, causing the blood-stained, stepped temple to crumble and the semi-conjured earth elemental to collapse. So, I know it's not exactly Shakespeare or anything too deep, but we had a lot of fun with it. Now, normally when we do one-shots, I make a load of pre-gens in advance and I get the player characters to pick one, or if I want them to generate their own characters, I get them to do it in advance so that it doesn't eat up a lot of the session time. However, with Knave 2nd edition character generation being fairly random and quick to do, it took us less than 10 minutes, probably less than 5 to be honest, to have a couple of characters ready to roll. The players both enjoyed it and I had a blast running it. The notes on converting monsters from old school games were easy to follow, and it took me only a few months to convert a load of creatures from my original Adventures Reincarnated version of the Art of Dread on the fly to use with Knave 2nd edition. So, although this isn't a review as such, there are plenty of people who've reviewed the book online. I'm very glad I got in on the Kickstarter, and I think it's a great game, to be honest. I can't speak to how well it'd do for longer campaigns. I'd have to try that to find out. However, for one-shots or shorter form games, or you want to just run a quick and dirty version of a D&D module, it's pretty much at the top of the heap as far as I'm concerned. I think the real advantage of the game, though, is that it could be used as a bridge to bring together source material from numerous different iterations of D&D, all converted to run under this very simple system that still, at least in my opinion, feels like D&D. And the reactions of my players and the sort of banter we had as we were playing the game felt very much like one of the best versions of D&D that I've enjoyed in a long time. So if you want to find a simple and quick version of D&D that comes in a lovely small form book, because small form books for the win, and it's not going to cost you the earth, I really cannot recommend highly enough that you pick up a copy of Knave 2nd edition. I'm sure you'll very much enjoy it. So that's it for this episode. If you want to send us a voicemail and be featured like Ricardo was earlier on in a future episode talking about this or anything else to do with the tabletop RPG hobby, we'd love to hear from you, and you can drop us a message either on like Discord or SpeakPipe. There's a link on my Substack and there'll be links in the description of this show. We'd love to hear from you. So until I speak to you again, take care, stay safe, and whatever you're playing, have fun. Take care.